Hello, welcome again to Sport Unlocked after a bit of a break altogether.
Yeah, for various reasons, we've not been here the last couple of weeks, but we're back, all in the same room for a change, and good to see you guys.
Martyn Ziegler from the Times, Tariq Panja from the New York Times, myself, Rob Harris from Sky News.
Nice to be with you guys again. Lots to catch up on. You guys have been on your travels?
Yes, out in Washington for the World Cup draw, and the fallout from that still continues. Is FIFA facing its worst crisis under Gianni Infantino?
I think it probably is, and because of the announcement of the World Cup ticket prices. I mean, there have been lots of things that FIFA have been criticised about, but I think this is the first time that the average fan has been on the warpath, basically, because of the scale of the ticket prices. And this is the announcement how much the allocation to the national associations, how much those fans will have to pay.
We can get into some of the detail of the pricing in a moment, but particularly the stuff we cover. Regular fans do turn their ears off from it. They're not engaged with the governance questions, but this has really resonated.
Yeah, this is the World Cup, this great tournament which we talk about every week on this podcast. It's the tournament that gets everyone really alive and thinking about football, even those who don't go to games at club level. And people save up so much money from all over the world to enjoy this experience. And it already is leaving a sour taste, isn't it?
And we only got the details in the days after the World Cup draw, so we can even reflect on the World Cup draw and everything experienced with Donald Trump there later on. And there was a brief chance to speak to Gianni Infantino. He seemed very pleased with himself, very delighted. Nothing on the record with us. The pod was being talked about a lot in DC.
Yeah, people was coming up to us and saying, what are you going to be saying on the pod this week? And obviously there's so much material. But yeah, the ticket prices, it's interesting that FIFA haven't directly responded to any questions about the criticism they've had from the fans groups.
Should we get into how much these tickets are now? Just what could people face if they're trying to get to watch their teams at the World Cup next summer?
Well, we were told that they start from $60 for the team-specific tickets.
Yeah, that was the big claim. Those were going to be the cheapest tickets, but actually, when it came down to what the allocation is for the national associations, that they will get 8% of the stadium for each match. None of those $60 tickets. In fact, considerably more. I think we're talking 5 times the amount, almost, certainly 4.5 times the amount. We're talking like $250. And that's just for a sort of the cheapest group game. And the final, if you want to follow your team all the way to the final, you're going to pay more than £3,100 to get to the final. I think the biggest comparison with that is, I know it's a different country, but if you were an England fan who went to the Euro 2024 final in Berlin, you may have paid only £91 to get into that final. And you have to pay more than £3,000. I mean, not surprising. People think this is crazy.
And this is before we were talking, before this 8% allocation, about the so-called dynamic pricing model that FIFA had issued for this World Cup, which meant that ticket prices would be set at a number and they could be ramped up based on demand and come down. But these tickets, the allocation for the FAs, i.e. the fans who follow their teams at home and away, whether from England or Argentina or any of the other 48 countries, these are the fixed prices. And they are astronomical, even compared to what was the most expensive World Cup, the luxury, the VVIP World Cup, which we called it on the pod in Qatar.
One of the issues in the US is the fact you can legally resell tickets at a profit. There aren't the same laws that exist, say, in the UK that prevent that. So we can see these tickets being resold as well at a markup. But also the challenge is, where do you price point these tickets? Because if FIFA flogged them all for $1, there'd be people who would buy a load up for the prestige games and resell them and cash in themselves. And as FIFA would say, well, that money won't go back into football.
No, I mean, I can understand that argument, but these tickets are going to be bought. You have to be a member. Say, talking from an England perspective, you have to be a member of the official England Travel Club. This isn't any old person buying at random. So if these people have been asked to pay for their tickets, yes, they can resell them, but I think it's far less likely. And if you're in this travel club, you should be given opportunity to follow the team, create the atmosphere, and be there without being having to pay sort of life-changing sums of money that can, affect your whole family.
Because also, it's not just about the ticket prices, it's going around the world. Can you afford to fly to the US? Can you stay for several weeks in the US? Can you take time off work? Obviously, you can't really leave school for that time, or you shouldn't be. There's a quite hefty financial commitment to go to the World Cup and provide the atmosphere that becomes the talking point and helps to sell the product.
Absolutely. This was always going to be a really expensive travel experience, even before these ticket prices were considered, right? Going to America, staying in a hotel, the travel across the vast territories here. We're talking about 3 countries: well, Mexico, Canada, and the United States. And we've got this this ticket situation. But also, when we're talking about FIFA, you mentioned $1 tickets, and they need to do all of these things.
$1 tickets we don't exist. No one's advocating for those. Just a number put out there.
Right. But FIFA's mission, last time I looked at it, is the governing body for football. It's a non-profit organisation. Its mission is to grow the sport of football, whether in participation or popularity. Now, what a great opportunity for people to come from all walks of life to enjoy the World Cup, whether they're supporting their own team or following other teams that them or their kids might enjoy. This is such a turn-off, and it creates this idea that football, the sport of the people, is no longer, it's really a sport for the elite. And we're recording this in Britain, the 3 of us, today. And there's a cost of living crisis. Now, you put these prices out there. It's incredible how expensive these matches are.
And it's not just an English story, this as well. Looking at Ghanaian media, they're putting about the high cost it is for them to go to matches. So just looking at some of the group stage games for them, they're saying, in this particular app, that Ghana fans will have to pay between $140 and $600 for group stage games. That's Joy Sports reporting that.
But why do you think this is the biggest crisis facing Infantino that we talked about? And how does this play out? Does he just close his mind to it, move on to the next thing, think, you've got Donald Trump and he's my big mate, it doesn't really matter? But why do you think this is such a big crisis?
Well, I suppose one thing is there any consequence of this? If there's all these protests from fans, ultimately, what's going to happen? What sort of backlash can there be that would lead to any sort of impact on him beyond it just being negative coverage and headlines?
My sense is it will be brazened out like everything else that's happened so far. And why is it the biggest crisis? Maybe because it's directly hitting his constituents. You've got these football associations that make up FIFA, and they are probably getting hammered in their national associations, in their local media, by football stakeholders, whether fans, other people, governments saying, what are you doing? Why are these tickets so expensive for us in Argentina, Croatia, England, wherever, France? These are all members of FIFA, and that's where it's going to hit, I think.
And if you want tournaments from FIFA, whether that's the senior level or youth ones, you can't get on the wrong side of FIFA because there might be some consequence, although they would say it's a process unconnected to the politics of it. And the FAs are obviously getting some of the fan groups onto them, but we've not seen any speaking out. The English Football Association said they'd be forwarding the complaints on, which is maybe the easiest way. You just basically hit forward on an email without having to necessarily be seen as complaining yourself.
No, exactly. I think that's a good point. I mean, the German FA, the DFB, they have been perhaps one of the lone voices who have spoken out about this. They said they would have preferred that the tickets were more affordable, and that but they said that they had no influence over those ticket prices at all. And they will try and do what they can to help fans, but obviously it's limited. I think it's really good that they've spoken out. They've not been scared to do so. The English FA, obviously, they've got, the 2035 Women's World Cup. Perhaps they feel that they can't be too critical of the people who've just given them this tournament. I don't know.
Just in case they lose out in the bid?
Well, they're the only bidders, but I mean, football politics, a bit like Donald Trump and Gianni Infantino, FIFA falling over themselves to do everything they can for Trump, and I think we'll come on to that. But maybe it's the same sort of thing. You don't, the English FA doesn't, or the other host nations of the 2035 Women's World Cup don't want to do anything to sour relations.
Long memories at UEFA from the English FA protesting about the changes at the UEFA Congress. When was that? 2024, February?
Yeah, I think around there. It was in Paris. I think that was where England and maybe one other country were the lone voices in the room, even though privately all sorts of people were sort of upset at statute changes. But again, it speaks to this point, as you said. Only the Germans are publicly spoken up about this, as Martyn said, and he's given them credit for that. But clearly, loads of them are getting angry letters and emails and everything else from supporters groups. But this is a really good example which shows up the structure of football, how one person at the top, whoever the president is of FIFA, can have so much power over the rest of the organization, even though loads of them hate what's going on. This just shows you how structurally inept the organization is. And I don't think it's going to change. And this is what we're stuck with. And when you have crises like this, it really shows it up.
So a lot of questions were being asked once the ticket pricing emerged on Thursday, then late on Friday night. We did get a statement from FIFA, but that was headline 5 million ticket requests in 24 hours underlines soaring global demand for the FIFA World Cup. Then you go right to the bottom of the statement, which effectively was the sort of defence of their position after it reminded people about the travel packages they can get in hospitality. As a non-for-profit organisation, FIFA reinvests the revenue it generates from the FIFA World Cup to fuel the growth of football. They highlight the men's and women's, then the youth football funded. And it says it's fueling the growth through the 211 FIFA member associations globally. That FIFA expects to reinvest over 90% of its budgeted investments for the cycle back into the game.
Well, they can. There was. And I was actually in an Uber the other day, and the driver was a guy who was born in Iran, living in London. And he was saying he was on the ticket application thing, and he was like, he'd been in...
While you're driving?
Well, no, well, it was there. It was there. I'm not... He was driving very safely, and he said he was in the waiting queue for this, and he was really desperate to get these tickets. And it just showed me, like, everybody loves this tournament. He would love to see Iran. The guy, he said he can't go back to his country given the politics. He's been living in Britain for a number of years, and he'd never been to a World Cup. And it was his dream to take him, his wife, and his young child to the US to watch Iran at the World Cup. It's a captive audience. People love football, and FIFA really should not be sweating this at the level they are, because this guy's desperation and need is being treated as a way to get top dollar away from people who love football.
So there is a sort of reputational comms issue here. It's always the question, how much power do comms have to be able to influence the messaging? Can they in some way get the authority to be able to put more things out, to put a response out? If anyone had sort of war gamed this, knowing when we're at the draw, the ticket prices would come out and be a backlash, you think they'll start to lay the groundwork, they do something on the record that would start to set out how the pricing works, how the ticketing works, to sort of soften the landing of these ticket prices. But there was nothing like that around the draw, a chance to sort of communicate the ticketing and how they come to work out the prices.
Yeah, I mean, I might be wrong, but I actually think FIFA's misjudged this. I don't think they realised quite what a furore that was going to be unleashed by this. And it really is quite something else.
And that's always one of the things within FIFA. How much is being sort of suggested to those making the decisions? By the way, this is how this will land in the public. That's often how things work in organisations. Is that even being listened to? If they do they feel they have the power to be able to give the bad news and say this isn't going to go down well with fans, and give options of this is how you can actually help to at least communicate with fans through us in the media as well?
I don't know how you would have softened this particular announcement given the enormous, exorbitant prices as well for this. And one of the...
Overshadow it with some other bigger news.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know what's bigger.
A new prize.
A new prize, yeah, we've already got a peace prize. I don't know what else. But listen, the thing I was wondering is this one of the answers FIFA and others give, and I noticed with American fans or people in America posting on social media saying, well, it's a free market. And this is, in America, people pay a lot of money to attend events, whether it's going to the theatre, whether it's going to watch NFL, NBA. This is the American market. But then you think, who is the World Cup for? Is it for the world? Is it for the people? Is it for Americans because they're hosting it? This is the disconnect as well. US people, American people pay a lot of money for sports tickets, and Gianni Infantino keeps saying with Trump that these are 104 Super Bowls, and they seem to be pricing it that way. And this is the question: who is this World Cup for?
And some are suggesting on social media, well, it's a big one-off event for Americans. They're going to spend the money. They've got the money to get to these matches. There's enough millions of people who are going to do it. So is it a supply and demand thing? Are people willing to pay for it? Where you can take that money in and you can reinvest it in football. Although very recently, FIFA have done this thing with the $1 billion Saudi fund, haven't they? So there's a lot of money already coming in to reinvest in the FAs.
I just think they've got more money than they know what to do with already.
Well, I mean, think about 2027. Gianni Infantino is going to standing for what should be his last term in office.
Breaking news revealed he's going to stand again.
Yes, expected to, I should probably add. But so the money that goes to national associations, I mean, we're talking some. This has been hugely increased since he took over in 2015. It's gone up several times, and this is his electorate. So, if making a big profit from the World Cup, giving more money to national associations, either to cover their administrative expenses, and FIFA makes it clear there's a lot of these associations can't function without the FIFA money. So you've got that. And then also you can put in bids for additional FIFA funding for specific projects. This is basically paying his electorate. I mean, it's a classic Sepp Blatter model, wasn't it? You know, the old goal project it was called. Now it's called FIFA Forward. It's the same sort of thing. You funnel money to the people who vote for you. I mean, any of you guys seriously think a challenger is going to come up to Gianni Infantino, or do they just know that the election's in the bag?
Whichever challenge is going to come, the model you've described is have to offer even more money, and this is classic pork barrel politics. Unfortunately, this is the model, and you have to go back to when Gianni Infantino was elected in 2016. Why did he come in? What was the loudest applause? He offered 4 times what Blatter was offering, 2 times more than I think his nearest challenger, Sheikh Salman, was offering, and guess what? He became the FIFA president. What should have happened, maybe, after everybody was arrested and FIFA was almost shut down in 2015, was a complete overhaul of the system. But we didn't get that. We've got more of this. And in fact, it's going back even further to what it was like under Blatter. These reforms that we've had have gone, almost. We're going to have 26, 29 new committees, more grace and favour jobs. It is almost exactly like it was pre-arrest.
The first World Cup draw event without any press conference. I mean, there were a couple of things. Arsene Wenger and Gialis did a panel. Pierluigi Collina did a panel, but it was like mainly Q&A on stage with limited questioning from the floor. Although some media questions were allowed.
Yeah, there was a few. I unfortunately wasn't selected to ask any questions myself. Just trying to remember the last time I was actually chosen by FIFA to ask a question. I think it might have been like pre-COVID almost.
Yeah, no organising committee press conference out in DC.
So the organising committee is also different now. This is FIFA, isn't it? There isn't. In the past, you would have local organising committees from the FAs. This is a FIFA production. Guys, I wasn't in Washington. Can I get some of your kind of memories or your highlights? Can I ask actually, what was the strangest thing that you saw from TV? It was, in many ways, it felt like a whole event designed for the US president.
Well, everything was shaped around him the whole day. It took almost 90 minutes before we got onto the draw part with the FIFA Peace Prize. Again, as we mentioned previously, many sports would relish the opportunity to get Donald Trump and the attention afforded on the event by having him there. That was the only way of actually getting some coverage in places. The only way it got onto the front page of the New York Times was on the day of the draw because you'd done a story about Gianni Infantino's relationship with Donald Trump and the Peace Prize.
Yeah, because it was a quirky, interesting story about two powerful men. And it was such a strange thing, wasn't it? Given this relationship, it's a very odd one. There hasn't been one I can think of in history between a sporting figure and a politician in the way Gianni Infantino and Donald Trump seem to be part of each other's world.
And then it wasn't on the Times front page on the Saturday after the draw. Washington Post, it was being held in Washington, only featured it as a tiny tease with a few lines of text to reference it was going to be inside the paper. It was on the front page of the Wall Street Journal because they had a picture of Donald Trump receiving the Peace Prize. So it was not dominating DC news. That was more about the unexpected snowstorm. It wasn't the main dominant story in the US in the way it would be perhaps virtually in any other country around the world if they hosted the draw.
Talking about the unexpected snowstorm, world's smallest guitar came out for the journalists who were standing in the snow for 90 minutes to get through security. But
not FIFA's fault per se, the Secret Service, with the fact the presence of Trump needed that extra security.
You coped okay, I hope.
Yeah, no, it was fine. No, just to give listeners a bit of a sort of rundown of how this was tailored to Donald Trump. So there was a Peace Prize, which was obviously established a few weeks beforehand. No process, no shortlist, no judge. Just basically, is going to give it to Donald Trump.
I did though think though afterwards that technically we don't know if the Nobel Prize has a shortlist. It only emerges sometimes later on.
Well, whether it does or not, there was no discussion by any committee. Okay, let's put it like that. Obviously the Nobel Prize is a discussion by a committee. There was no discussion. So there's that. Apparently, I'm told that the White House actually had quite a big involvement in what the size of the Peace Prize itself, what it looked like.
Which is two hands on a globe.
Yeah, sort of lifting up a globe, some sort of hands underneath a globe. And
whose hands were they?
Well, good question. And but yeah, the fact that they were sort of having really these close discussions about what the prize was going to look like, how big it was. I mean, that's, to me, that says everything. Then you got YMCA playing at the end of the service, which is the MAGA sort of theme tune for Donald Trump. Andrea Bocelli, who performed in the Oval Office a few weeks ago. Wayne Gretzky and Tom Brady, the ice hockey and NFL stars who'd both been in Donald Trump's VIP tent at the Club World Cup final. I mean, was there any part of the actual show which wasn't sort of, in some ways, and looked at a kind of flattery of Donald Trump?
No McDonald's food.
Surely that, we missed that opportunity.
They are a FIFA sponsor, aren't they?
Yeah, well, I don't think either of you were in the green room, so let's just say there might have been some McDonald's food.
I mean, it did, though, bring together the leaders of Mexico and Canada for an afternoon. Trumpet's team stayed much along at the Kennedy Center, or Trump Kennedy Center as he tries to call it, than was expected anyway. And it did seem to ensure some smoother relations for one afternoon between the neighbours. No battles over tariffs publicly, no battles over drugs, no threats of attacking Mexico with a military strike.
So many people's surprise, his comments were kept within the time limits, which hasn't been the case. You mentioned the leaders of Mexico and Canada, Claudia Sheinbaum and Mark Carney were there, and I must say they felt like props for Donald Trump. And they both, I think, handled themselves very well, particularly Claudia Sheinbaum. She was very calm and composed and just did enough not to draw any attention. She was there doing just enough. And let's remember what this was. This was a World Cup draw about football for football fans all over the world, really excited to see who their teams were going to play in the World Cup. And it felt so secondary to everything else that was going on that day.
And we had a part two on the Saturday when they revealed the schedule for where the matches were going to be. And some cities have ended up with worse groups of matches than others in terms of the quality of clubs. It did stretch it out into another day. And it was headline news, particularly in the UK. So it's probably a success for FIFA, the fact they managed to produce a second show, which gave them a second wave of, at that point, not negative country. It was more in the UK, for instance. Scotland going to have to play at the equivalent of 2 a.m. at UK time, so the pubs will have to be open during the night.
Yeah, they hit some positive headlines for a short period until they realised that Egypt v Iran was going to be in Seattle, where the local organising committee had previously planned to have that as the Pride match. for the World Cup. Now, this isn't events inside the stadium. This is outside the stadium. But nevertheless, you had Egypt and Iran, the football federations, reacting very strongly against this because obviously in those countries there are laws against homosexuality and they don't want to be associated with the Pride match at all. So that's a tricky one for FIFA, who have not replied at all when asked about the issue.
Very different from perhaps in the past where they talk up equality and inclusion and, you know, campaigning against discrimination in football. Now they don't really like to talk about that in any way. Yeah, you don't really get a sense of them promoting inclusivity in round matches, that messaging, that's sort of social causes that perhaps run into conflict with practices, beliefs, political agendas in some countries.
That also be part of the relationship between Gianni Infantino and Donald Trump as well. Given his views on DEI, etc., and the corporate culture, how that's changed America, sure. But, one person who wasn't there to maybe complain in person about on behalf of Iran was the Iranian FA president. But why? Because he wasn't given a visa to travel to the US as part. I think they got half of the visas they were supposed to get for the draw. So there's so much politics around this. Also, this Peace Prize makes FIFA a political actor, doesn't it, really?
And I got a chance to sit down with Andrew Giuliani, son of Rudy. He's the executive director of the White House World Cup Task Force. And you end up talking about things like, will there be ICE raids to target migrants who they believe are violating migration laws? Will they be targeting World Cup matches? And basically, they do anything necessary to protect things in the US. You're talking about visas. They're not going to budge on that in any way. And from that, you get a sense of the big White House involvement, which FIFA see as a way of smoothing the organisation of the tournament, getting that fast-track decision-making, but does immerse themselves in the politics even more.
I think this is a classic unforeseen circumstance, this issue of the Pride match with FIFA, and they think, well, if we don't say anything about it, let's hope the problem goes away.
It's an interesting one. Does not talking about an issue make it go away, or does it leave a stack of questions we ask eventually? Or, like with many things in the last couple of years, so many different questions stack up that we've moved on to the next thing, and perhaps we're not interested in ticket prices by the time we get an opportunity next, perhaps with Gianni Infantino on the record.
It's another example of maybe following a pattern from his friend in the White House. It's the idea of flooding the zone with news, and one story can't be followed to its definitive conclusion before another one pops up, and we move on and we move on and we move on.
Yeah, big difference though is Trump cannot help but speak every possible opportunity he can get, which is completely the opposite to Gianni Infantino. He's taking, obviously, the opposite approach, that if I don't say anything, then when I do eventually get sort of confronted in a corridor in 2 years or the week before the World Cup, the one question, people have moved on from the World Cup ticket prices. But I think if anybody asks them about World Cup ticket prices, he will find it a very difficult question to answer satisfactorily.
He's got enough time to plan the answer. He did walk in with Donald Trump to the World Cup draw down a red carpet where they faced a lot of media. The White House press pool were there, the pool that follows Donald Trump, the media that are allowed in the pool. Also, the rights holder media were there. So everyone was using the opportunity to ask Donald Trump questions, but people could have shouted them out to Gianni Infantino. But when you've got the US president there, perhaps he's more likely to be the target of the questions.
Yeah, very tricky one he was asked. Can USA win the World Cup?
Gianni Infantino or Donald Trump?
Donald Trump was asked that, and yes, they can.
Yeah, he didn't face the question of being asked to name the first 11. Well, a lot of FIFA members are all together in Washington, but that hasn't been it for the end of the year because this is the week when they're gathering in Doha, not just for a FIFA council meeting, but also the FIFA Best Awards, built up by FIFA to be the biggest event in world football, but very different from the Ballon d'Or, which invites the media to come and cover it and turns it into a big event.
This is the first FIFA Best, I think, that has not had a media invited or an event that is seen as a big deal. This is, as you said, is held in Doha. And also, all the FIFA members, I understand, can attend this FIFA gala. Now, you were talking about why does FIFA need to sell ticket prices at such a high price? Because it needs to fund football, it needs to give these FAs all of this money. Arguably, you will say, well, why didn't it cut back on some of this waste? All of these people were probably in Washington, traveling from wherever they come from, and then now they're going to the Middle East, traveling there on whose dime. If FIFA really wanted to fund football, it might want to cut back on some of its entertainment costs. It does spend a huge amount of money ferrying people all over the place in luxury. And as I mentioned earlier, these committees about the committee system, more than 20 of these committees with dozens of people on them, this is huge expense.
It's quite interesting as we talk about all these issues, and quite a few of us together at the World Cup draw, how many media necessarily always get into these issues. And perhaps the ticket pricing has been one that might show the difference between the influence of football media and more of the sports news media.
This has definitely been one where the more traditional media have been raising issues, speaking to fans groups, and reflecting the concerns, rather than the influence media, which are, I think, probably fair without being too insulting, that more looking to do sort of celebrity type stories.
Who we've had the opportunity to ask questions to towards the end of the year. The IOC have done their standard in-person and remote access pressers where you can ask loads of questions. During Olympics, they get loads of questions about tickets, that normally empty seats and things like that. And you've actually been able to ask some questions about the LA games as well and tickets.
Yeah, I went to the LA, asked them will they be using dynamic pricing. They said they will definitely not be using them for the first round of ticket sales that they announce in January. I think they're not saying beyond that. They said their plans are still to be formulated. I mean, I think there's a chance that they may do that with future rounds. But somebody said to me, who's well positioned, that they will do their ticket system in almost totally different ways to FIFA's.
But someone in the States buys up the 100-metre final tickets, they can flog them at a huge profit for themselves, can't they?
We don't know.
But you can resell tickets online.
You can resell tickets online, but what the systems are going to be, we don't know. So,
or how much they'll price them.
Yes, or how much they'll price them. I mean, I think that the IOC may have some sort of things in place to make it much more difficult to do that, but I don't know. We'll have to wait and see.
Yeah, see, there's a degree of cynicism around the ticketing situation with this World Cup. It's under the assumption that people will behave in the worst possible way if they get hold of these tickets. Like, people don't want to go and watch the World Cup. They just want to profiteer. I'm sure there'll be people who want to make money, a buck off the World Cup. But I would like to think most people just love to go and attend a great World Cup match. And those people, I would hope, might outnumber these other people. The thing is, given this ticket price, we'll never know because it's so expensive. The regular guy cannot afford these tickets.
Quite a FIFA special this as we return, but maybe something unusual we've heard in the world of football. A team actually complaining tickets aren't being sold more expensively.
Yes, this is the FA Cup third round match between Wolverhampton Wanderers in the Premier League and Shrewsbury Town. And Shrewsbury, because of the way the FA Cup works, is that the visiting team gets effectively, I think it's like 40% of the ticket sales. Now, Wolves are making these ticket prices much lower than they normally charge for the Premier League because they're going through a difficult time on the pitch, and also I think they want to try and attract fans to go and think that they don't want to price it too high, so they're very, very cheap. But the downside of that is Shrewsbury Town, they're sort of one of the minnows of the FA Cup, got to the third round, and their expected income is going to be much lower than expected because Wolves are pricing the tickets so low.
You know who they should write to? They should write to Mr. Gianni Infantino at FIFA and make sure those prices come right back up.
Well, we're still free, and you can always rate and review us, subscribe, and then we land in your feeds, and hopefully more regularly do so. And you can message us at Sport Unlocked on all the social platforms. But for now, thank you for listening. Goodbye.